This is one of Cluny the Scourge's Rome Total War battles. I'm playing as Macedon, my opponent is playing Armenia. I've taken 6 units of Cretan archers, 6 units of King's Royal pikemen, who form my main battle line. I've taken 4 units of phalanx pikemen, who form a secondary battle line, with the intention of protecting against enemy cavalry making rear strikes. And I've taken 4 units of gold upgraded Greek cavalry, which I intend to use to hunt down enemy horse archers. The deployments for my archers are not ideal. I have 2 units on loose formation in front of my line and 4 on close behind. In close formation they'll be much more vulnerable to enemy missile fire. However, Cretan archers, like all the archer units in Hellenic factions, and also Roman archers, suffer from the problem of taking up far more space than regular archers, as you see here in this example. This makes it much more difficult to deploy them in such a way as to keep them protected by pikemen. Now my opponent, Okune, playing as Armenia, has taken 6 units of archers, 1 unit of horse archers, 1 of cataphract archers, 1 Arab light cavalry, 4 units of heavy spearmen, and behind them a second line of 3 legionaries to form a more mobile reserve, presumably with the intention of making outflanking maneuvers, and in his rear he has his main cavalry component, 3 units of cataphracts. Now as the battle began, my opponent deployed his horse archers on Cantabrian Circle to occupy the attention of my foot missile troops. They are much harder to hit when in Cantabrian Circle mode. I consequently ignored them with my Cretans once the main archery duel had begun, and you can see that the Armenian bowmen are all set to loose formation and therefore in the best deployment for surviving missile attacks, while for my own this is not the case. What should I have done? Instead of insisting on keeping my King's Royal pikemen drawn up ready in battle order in their thickly ranked fighting blocks, I should have deployed them on loose formation to cover a wider protective area in case of cavalry attack, ready to put them back into close formation once I was ready to begin the infantry assault. My objective here was to use my longer range superior Cretan archers to force the enemy to attack me. Realizing, however, that I have failed and that I'm not going to win the missile duel, I hurry my infantry forward, trusting in my second line of phalanx pikemen to protect me against cavalry, and my cavalry to protect my archers. I had to stop my infantry there to stop them from charging headlong into the archers and thus becoming involved in a melee engagement out of phalanx formation. Consequently, the legionaries were able to deploy their pillar over the heads of the spearmen to some mild effect. I deployed 1 unit of King's Royal pikemen on either side of the main battle line in an outflanking maneuver, as you see here, hoping to forestall similar moves by my enemy with his legionaries. At this point I made my second blunder, which was to be tempted into striking at his horse archers with my light cavalry. They're fast enough to catch them, and they do, and if I'd had them to myself, perhaps I would have destroyed them by an envelopment. In practice I clumsily ignored the enemy light cavalry that he had standing nearby to protect against such a move. He struck into my flank and sent my Greek cavalry packing. I should have been more patient, waited for success in the infantry engagement to lure the enemy into using his cavalry, so that I could make a counterstroke against them on my terms. I also clumsily left this left-hand unit of King's Royal pikemen out of phalanx formation, and it was a tempting target for this unit of Armenian cataphracts. I rushed one of my phalanx pikemen units forward to ward them off, and they correctly fled immediately. Now back over on the far right, I've routed one of his units of legionaries, and I'm achieving some success in rolling up the flank of the enemy infantry. I have been tempted by the creation of a gap into peeling away some of my secondary line of phalanx pikemen to further that aim, however, which will reduce my protection against rear strikes from enemy cavalry. I wish to reassure all fans of these battle videos that, like the devotees of any good cult, they are guaranteed of life everlasting after they die in Rome Total War Paradise, where they will become the little electronic soldiers on the screen, eternally fighting battles in a digital version of Valhalla. This will be available to them only so long as they do my bidding in life, however, and die for Cluny's glory when he commands that the time is right. This was not a subliminal message hidden in the battle video. Believe in Clooney. So with my cavalry essentially broken and my secondary phalanx line breaking up to face the flanks, my opponent seizes the opportunity to use his cavalry to inflict havoc in my rear. I've left myself now with only a single unit of pikemen to protect those archers, and as soon as they turn their backs to the main battle, my opponent cannily targets his archers against them. When you fire into the rear of a unit, it bypasses the shield component of their defense score. Now back over on the far right, my enemy now uses his main cavalry force, his super heavy cataphracts, to bring to bear against my flanking phalanxes. I blundered yet again there by ordering the pikeman unit to attack the cataphract unit that went wide to strike at my rear. This meant that they lifted their spears while they tried to redeploy and made them vulnerable to the second cataphract unit that went head on. Crushed between the two, they routed almost immediately. Now this mere phalanx pikeman unit out on my far right now, watching the elite King's Royal pikemen routing right in front of them, are much readier to panic and break themselves once their flanks become exposed. And now that all of the enemy cavalry is in my rear, they're pretty much free to run riot and destroy all of that valuable denarii that I poured into those expensive Cretan archers. You will notice this means that I no longer have any cavalry or archers as viable components in my army, while my opponent does. I am winning quite easily now in the centre as I roll up my enemy line, destroying his units from the rear and from the flanks. Orkune tries to upset this at this point by attempting a hammer and anvil strike against my rear, but I respond in time by ordering my men to about face, and his infantry facing those pikemen were so degraded by this time that they were unable to exploit that. I routed that cataphract unit. My opponent would have done better to target the thinner phalanx lines on my left instead of where I was thickest, most densely ranked. The situation overall now is very poor for me. Orkune, as you can see, still has plenty of cavalry available to use, menacing my rear, and he also has archers. Even once I have destroyed his infantry in the centre, how will I be able to respond to him? I will not be able to catch with infantry either archers set to skirmish mode, or cavalry who he can, with their superior mobility, keep out of my way and manoeuvre to my flanks and rear continually. With my general having just been burned to death as a sacrifice to the dark Armenian gods, much like Sergeant Howie from The Wicker Man, a frailty has been introduced into the morale of my men, which will weaken my position even further. Some of the phalanxes that were routed early on have regrouped at the very rear of the battlefield. I never even noticed them. Consequently, they displayed their contempt for the enemy's prowess by presenting their backs to them, and are slaughtered to a man. Always keep glancing down at the interface bar to check to see if those white flags have disappeared from the unit icons, because if you don't notice it, your opponent will. Maddeningly, even though I have utterly dispersed the enemy infantry, the general here managed to escape. He was an all-Armenia campus track and field star in his youth. So the finishing setup forms. I have a few damaged units of King's Royal Pikemen, who I now set on loose formation to better resist a prolonged missile attack. My opponent has archers, and cataphracts and some Arab light cavalry. Now if I were to form all of my pikemen into close formation, and my opponent were to conveniently charge all of his horsemen right into the face of my phalanxes, I could possibly win. Do you think that's likely to happen? No, me neither. I could chase after them, but what's the point? So we simply agree to go to triple speed and allow him to use up all of his ammunition. This gradually whittles away at my unit's morale, especially since they're also being affected by the panicked by fire attack influence. This goes on for some time, which I've edited out, and my opponent then strikes with all of his cavalry at once, and my phalanxes in loose formation are unable to resist him. So what were my mistakes? I needed more and stronger cavalry. I should have put less reliance on expensive Cretan archers. I deployed my Cretans incorrectly. I should have put them on loose formation, with phalanxes on loose formation to cover a wider area to protect them, and I should have been more patient with my cavalry.